I'm going to record a few movie reviews by Pauline Kael, the probably the most famous American film critic, and see what she thinks of some movies that I love. We'll see how this goes. Henry V. Shakespeare's Henry V, written in 1599 or thereabouts, is perhaps the greatest jingo play ever conceived. It celebrates the victory of the underdogs, the English. At Agincourt, King Henry's valiant archers, outnumbered 5-1 and exhausted and fighting on foreign soil, destroy the expensively armored French. When the tally is handed to Henry, he reads it aloud to his men. The French have lost 10,000 men, the English just 29. Then the modest, devout Henry cautions his soldiers not to boast of this victory, and he orders the singing of Non nobis Domine. Not unto us, O Lord, not unto us, but unto thy name give glory. But the play itself is far from modest. Written for an English audience, it tells us what great fighters we English are. And we're yeomen, naturally democratic. The French are sleek courtiers, an army of nobles, and a dauphin who jeers at us. Shakespeare is a jingo showman, but he's no jingo fool. Along with the crowd-pleasing heroism, the play offers doubts and complicated feelings. It suggests that what has led the Englishmen to Agincourt is military adventurism. Henry has allowed himself to believe the councillors who have told him he has a legitimate claim to the throne of France. Yet the arguments that convince him sound like monkey shines. The English are out for conquest. At the center of this ambivalent patriotic play is the 27-year-old king, who is steeling himself for the responsibilities of leadership, and has given up the disreputable pals of his carousing days. Our Henry isn't merely an ideal leader, a fair-minded, disciplined, man-to-man king. He's the ideal Englishman, honest, considerate, bluff, and so the ideal man. Yet, can an audience be meant to love a man who killed the heart of Jack Falstaff with the words, "I know thee not, old man," and orders the hanging of the petty thief Bardolph, his former drinking companion? King Henry is too judicious to be loved, but the role is a star turn. Audiences can love an actor bringing it off. Laurence Olivier played the part on the screen 45 years ago, in Henry V that he directed, with the encouragement of the British government. Britain was under attack, and his film caught the mood of the moment. It was, and remains, a heart-lifting triumph. It has bright colors, trick perspectives, and the enormous charm of childhood tales of chivalry. Olivier, he was 36, brings a playful, bashful glamour to the role. His voice rings out thrillingly. You carry the sound with you forever. The new version, adapted and directed by its star, the young Shakespearean actor Kenneth Branagh, in no way replaces that first Henry, but it finds a niche of its own. Branagh's Henry V isn't exultant. His approach doesn't make possible the kind of patriotic triumph joined to an artistic triumph that Olivier had. The times don't make it possible either. The new film reflects, or seems to reflect, Vietnam and the Thatcher government's Falklands War. Henry's archers, with their longbows, don't leap about in a way that suggests Robin Hood's men. The new battle at Agincourt is a slow-motion dance of bloody horror, and the victory is shallow and mournful. Branagh, he was the confused, infatuated young man in the moonlit water with Jacqueline Bisset in High Season, and he was Mr. Tansley to Rosemary Harris's Mrs. Ramsay in the TV To the Lighthouse, and Guy Pringle in the series Fortunes of War. was born into a Protestant working-class family in Belfast in 1960. As Henry, he has the flyaway hair of a schoolboy, and under his shiny, dark blonde mop, his face is not what used to be called nobly proportioned. The burning blue eyes, the thin slash of a mouth, the big, determined chin, the trace of baby fat in the cheeks, none of them match. Together, though, they convey a suggestion of secret knowledge, and his head, overscaled for his short frame, rivets attention. He has something of James Cagney's confident Irishness. He's an intensely likable performer, with a straightforwardness that drives the whole film ahead. Each of Henry's scenes, with a gallant, intelligent French herald, Mountjoy, played by Christopher Ravenscroft, advances the plot by showing Mountjoy taking ever larger measure of the king. Their encounters are like signposts in a friendship. Once Henry is away from the dark palace, where high officials lurk in the shadows, and is out of doors, he becomes a different man, the brave, affable soldier king. He'd rather be on his white horse than on his throne. Part of the fun is in Henry's surprising everyone by his resourcefulness, and Branagh plays the same game with the audience. Just after Henry has learned that his troops, mud-soaked, ragged, and sick, will have to fight the fresh, finely accoutred French, he says, "We are in God's hand." Rain comes pouring down on him, and he raises weary, distrustful eyes to heaven. The touch of irony is Olivier-like, but not too much so. And at Agincourt, just after Henry has learned of the slaughter of the non-combatant page boys, he listens to the compulsive chatter of the Welshman Llewellyn, played by Ian Holm, a pedant on the subject of military discipline, and the man's nuttiness suddenly gets to him. With tears and blood still streaking his face, he breaks into laughter. This daring release feels like pure, spontaneous Branagh. This actor's earthy, doughy presence is the wrapping for his beautiful, expressive voice. Emotion pours out of it with surprising ease. He's conversational without sacrificing the poetry. His readings are a source of true pleasure. Listening to him, you think, with an instrument like that, he can play anything. Yet he puts a symphony orchestra under the great St. Crispin's Day speech, which Olivier delivered a cappella. The Non Nobis Domine is magnificent as a male chorus joins the soloist. We hear it over the last view of the carnage at Agincourt, as Henry walks across the field of corpses, carrying Falstaff's murdered boy, played by Christian Bale. But then Branagh thickens the emotion with the rising sound of the orchestra, and the effect is banalized. He's given to thickening other actors' emotions the same way. Much of the film has been set at night, with fiery lighting. Flames and smoke from the siege of Harfleur outline Henry as he sits on his white horse and inspires his soldiers to cry God for Harry, England, and St. George. Campfires and torches illume the bivouac on the night before battle. Flickering fires give a Rembrandt glow to the interior of the inn where Falstaff, played by Robbie Coltrane, lies on his deathbed. There's a little too much Rembrandt glow. It's like the lush underscoring. It's imitation art. Branagh is not an overnight great movie maker. His attempts at spectacular effects strain his inventiveness, and he doesn't come up with anything comparable to the first flight of the arrows in the Olivier film, or to the battle in Wells's Chimes at Midnight. Olivier staged the play between brackets, moving from the stage of the Globe Theatre to a larger world of artifice. He used color and design anti-naturalistically. Branagh opens the play in a movie studio soundstage and attempts a more realistic approach. It's rather basic, and it's over-intense. Close-ups as a way to achieve immediacy, with many, too many, meaningful looks exchanged. You may begin to fixate on the actors' trendy haircuts. The battle scenes are powerful. Shown very close in, the images of fighting and its aftermath are like details of a large unseen painting. But Branagh, like a clever, gifted student, prolongs them. overworking his cadavers. He's a flamboyant realist. He has an appetite for theatrical excesses, as he shows in the deranged Darth Vader entrance he gives himself. He does everything but waggle a false nose at the camera. He shows it too in some of Derek Jacobi's carrying on as the chorus narrator. Jacobi slithers about from place to place, and at times he's like a radio announcer at the racetrack trying to crank up the listener's excitement. When the scenes require a light, stylized touch, Catherine of France, played by Emma Thompson, being given an English lesson by her companion, played by Geraldine McElwain, Henry wooing Catherine, Branagh echoes the Olivier version, but he can't quite find a rhythm. Since this fast-paced, fire and smoke movie lacks the formality that would give the courtship scene a tone, we don't know how to take it when Henry, having just met Catherine, says, "I love you." Branagh's interpretation of Henry V emphasizes the price paid for war, the bloodshed. He's trying to make it into an anti-war film, an epic noir. But he can't quite dampen the play's rush of excitement, not with Henry delivering all those rousing words to his soldiers, calling them, "We few, we happy few, we band of brothers." Shakespeare shows how the English language itself can be turned into a patriotic symbol. In keeping with his generation's supposed disillusion with war, Branagh has minimized the play's glorification of the English fighting man. His conception of how to film the play is to look closely at the conniving, the misgivings, the ego wars. He doesn't indicate why the French lost at Agincourt. We hear the Constable of France, played by Richard Easton, smugly saying, "I have the best armor in the world." But Branagh doesn't show that the French and their horses were fatally encumbered by their armor and chain mail and other trappings when the arrows hit. And obviously most of them would have hit the horses, whose bodies were more exposed. The riders fell into the water and mud, and were too weighed down to get up. They were massacred while they struggled like beetles on their backs. As Branagh stages the battle, with the two sides engaged in hand-to-hand combat, there's no way to understand why the English rather than the French won, except that God is with them. But, scene by scene, there's always more than enough to take in. It's a company of stars. Judi Dench as Mistress Quickly, calling adieu to her husband. Ancient Pistol, played by Robert Stephens. Paul Scofield as the melancholy French king, whose face foretells the doom of his army. Brian Blessed as Exeter. Richard Briers as cherry-nosed Bardolph. Alec McCowan as Ellie, and on and on. Branagh seems to have a special gift for bringing out great reactive moments. Ravenscroft's herald registering the probable consequences of the mistake the Dauphin has made in insulting this English king. The fear in the eyes of the English as they behold the hugeness of the approaching French army. Henry himself pretending not to be watching everyone watch him. Best of all, perhaps, is Ian Holmes' Fluellen, too obsessed to gauge other people's reactions, his bright eyes flashing while he talks for his own satisfaction. The film's point of view leaves you without elation, but the actors are so up that you feel their pride in working on true dramatic poetry. Thank you for listening.